Marcus, stay with me. Just stay with me. Almost there. He staggered forward the woman, a terrifyingly cold, dead weight in his arms. Ice crystals clung to her eyelashes, her face pale as death against the dark fabric of his worn jacket. Blinding snow ripped past them, swallowing the weak lights of his old truck just yards away. He risked a glance back, his little girl's face, small and scared, pressed against the icy window. Pulling this stranger from the wreckage of her luxury SUV had been instinct, keeping her alive until they reached warmth. That was a prayer hurled against the screaming blizzard. The wind didn't just blow, it screamed. A raw, keening sound ripped through the dense stands of pine-lining Montana's Route 47, shoving violent gusts of snow across the already treacherous asphalt. Each blast felt like a physical blow against the aging metal of Marcus Miller's Chevy truck. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles showing white against the worn, cracked leather cover. Driving in conditions like this wasn't just difficult. It felt like wrestling with something ancient and indifferent. The truck's heater wheezed, managing only a lukewarm sigh that did little to combat the bitter cold clawing at the iced-over windows. 12 hours crawling under transmissions and coaxing life back into engines others had given up on left, a familiar ache deep in Marcus's shoulders, a dull throb that echoed the fatigue behind his eyes. His coverall still carried the faint, honest scent of grease and motor oil, the perfume of his trade. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was getting home. He stole a glance in the rearview mirror. In the back seat, cocooned in a world of sleep and a patchy fleece blanket dotted with faded stars, was Lily his Lily. 6 years old, with lashes long and dark, like her mother's, fanning out against her cheek. Her small chest rose and fell, in the steady rhythm of untroubled dreams, her soft breath fogging a small circle on the window beside her. Just seeing her peaceful and safe settled something in Marcus's own chest, a small anchor against the storm's fury. He remembered Sarah Lily's mum, her smile that could chase away any winter chill. The memory brought a familiar pang, sharp and sudden, quickly followed by the low hum of worry about the overdue heating bill and the truck's aging tires. Surviving wasn't always easy, but for Lily, he'd face down any storm. The blizzard had ambushed the afternoon, descending with a speed that defied the forecast. The radio had crackled a warning earlier. Whiteout conditions, visibility near zero, travel only if absolutely necessary. But turning back hadn't been an option. Not with Lily waiting at the sitters, her small face pressed against the glass. Now the road ahead was a desolate ribbon of white, his tire tracks vanishing almost as soon as they were made. Darkness pressed in the world, reduced to the swirling snow caught in his flickering headlights and the skeletal silhouettes of the pines. He was already picturing home, the small drafty house that was theirs, the wood stove crackling, maybe warming up a can of soup for Lily. Simple comforts hard-earned. Then something flickered in the periphery, a pulse of orange, dim and struggling against the onslaught of white hazard lights. Instinctively, Marcus slowed, easing the Chevy toward the shoulder, with the practiced gentleness of someone who knew ice intimately. There, nose-deep in a snowdrift, sat a vehicle that looked utterly alien in this rugged landscape. A Range Rover, sleek, black, expensive and profoundly still. Its rear tires were half buried, the engine clearly dead. The orange hazard lights blinked with a weakening pulse like a fading heartbeat. As he drew closer, a knot tightened in his stomach. No movement inside, no lights, save for the hazards. But the passenger side window. It was cracked open a few inches, just enough for ventilation or a desperate, silent cry for help. He pulled the Chevy a few feet ahead, shifted into park, the old transmission groaning in protest. Reaching back, he gently tugged Lily's star-covered blanket a little higher over her shoulder. She murmured something soft in her sleep, a sigh that tore at his heart. He couldn't just leave someone out here. Not in this. Stepping out of the cab felt like walking into a wall of ice and wind. The cold slammed into him, stealing his breath, stinging his exposed cheeks. Snow drove sideways, sharp and relentless, already soaking through the sleeves of his thin jacket by the time he reached the Range Rover. He pounded on the driver's side window, his gloved fist making a dull thud against the frozen glass. "Hey, anyone in there?" His voice was snatched away by the wind, no response. He cupped his hands, pressing his face close. Peering into the darkness within, a shape slumped over the steering wheel, unmoving hair obscuring the face. "A woman, hey!" he shouted again, banging harder. Still nothing. He circled quickly to the passenger side, testing the door handle. Locked. His eyes fell on the cracked window. Wide enough, he didn't waste another second. Sprinting back to his own truck, ignoring the burn in his lungs, he fumbled under the seat for the heavy crowbar he kept for emergencies, usually stubborn bolts, not luxury SUVs. Time felt like it was slipping away, freezing solid just like everything else. He jammed the flat end of the crowbar into the gap in the window. With a mechanic's practiced leverage and a grunt of effort, he jimmied the lock mechanism. The click echoed unnaturally loud in the howling wind. As the door swung open, the woman's body listed sideways, limp falling toward the opening. "Whoa there. Easy," Marcus muttered, catching her before she tumbled out into the snow. Her skin, where it brushed against his hand, was terrifyingly cold. Her lips had a bluish tinge. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse, faint, thready. But there, her breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. He didn't know who she was, what she was doing out here, in a car worth more than he made in 2 years. It didn't matter. She was human. She needed help now. He slid one arm under her knees, the other around her back. She was lighter than he expected, alarmingly so. As he lifted her, her head lolled against his shoulder. He half ran, half stumbled back towards the sanctuary of his truck. The weight in his arms, a heavy counterpoint to the lightness of the falling snow that pelted them relentlessly. He maneuvered her carefully into the passenger seat, pushing aside empty coffee cups and stray tools. He shrugged off his own worn jacket, not much, but better than nothing, and draped it over her, tucking it around her shoulders. He cranked the heater dial to its maximum setting, knowing it was a feeble defense against the profound chill radiating from her body. He slammed the door shut, sealing them inside the rattling cab. His heart hammered against his ribs. His eyes darted from the treacherous road ahead, visible only in shifting patches, to the still pale woman beside him, then back to the rearview mirror, checking on the small sleeping form still oblivious in the back. Just then, Lily stirred. One sleepy eye opened, blinking slowly as it adjusted to the dim interior light. Her small voice, thick with sleep, cut through the howl of the wind. "Daddy," she murmured, pushing herself up slightly. "Who's that?" Marcus reached over, pressing the back of his rough hand gently against the woman's icy forehead, then against her wrist, feeling again for that fragile pulse. It was still there, faint but steady. He met his daughter's wide, questioning eyes in the mirror. "Someone who needs help, sweetie," he said, his voice low and quiet, trying to project a calm. He didn't entirely feel. Just someone who needs a little help. And then, with the weight of the storm and a stranger's life pressing in on him, Marcus Miller pulled his old Chevy truck back onto the invisible road, the darkness and the driving snow closing in around them like a shroud. The journey home had just become infinitely more complicated. The final ascent to Marcus's house was a groaning crawl up an icy gravel road, barely visible beneath the driving snow. The Chevy's tires spun and caught the engine whining in protest against the incline, and the cold. Inside, the only sounds were the rhythmic wheeze of the heater, the howl of the wind battering the truck, and the shallow, fragile breaths coming from the woman slumped in the passenger seat. Marcus kept his focus. Absolute hands, steady on the wheel, navigating by memory and instinct more than sight. Finally, a flickering porch light emerged from the swirling white, a tiny beacon marking the end of the treacherous road. His house stood small and defiant against the storm. A simple one-story structure, with a rusted tin roof, shedding snow in sheets, and windows glowing with a warm, hazy light. It wasn't much, but tonight it felt like a fortress. He parked as close as he could, leaving the engine running for its precious heat, and hurried around to the passenger side. Opening the door carefully, he reached in to lift the woman again. She felt colder now, her stillness unnerving. He gathered her into his arms, surprised again by how little she weighed beneath the layers of expensive damp fabric. He kicked the front door shut behind them, the sound echoing slightly in the sudden relative quiet. The air inside wasn't exactly warm, but it was dry still and blessedly free of the wind's relentless assault. It smelled of pine smoke from the wood-burning stove, old coffee, and the faint, lingering scent of the cheap cinnamon air freshener he kept plugged in near the door home. He moved straight to the small living room, dominated by a worn couch sagging comfortably in the middle, and the cast-iron wood stove radiating a palpable heat in the corner. He lowered her gently onto the couch, propping her head with a couple of faded throw pillows. The room was modest, undeniably lived in. Walls showed signs of careful patching. The braided rug was frayed at the edges. A stack of Lily's picture books sat slightly crooked on a low shelf. It was a room built from necessity, and love, not design. Catalogues. Kneeling beside the couch, Marcus carefully worked off her snow-caked designer boots, revealing feet encased in thin, inadequate socks. He chafed her feet gently between his rough hands, trying to restore some circulation, then retrieved a pair of thick grey wool socks, his own, from a basket near the stove, and eased them onto her icy feet. He found the quilt his grandmother had made years ago, the edges tattered, but the colors still vibrant, and tucked it securely around her legs and torso. Daddy Lily stood in the doorway, connecting the living room to the short hall, dragging her own star-patterned blanket. Her eyes wide and curious were fixed on the still figure on their couch. She wasn't sleepy anymore, just watchful. Marcus looked up. "Hey, sweetie. It's okay." Lily shuffled closer, her blanket trailing behind her. She stopped a few feet away, clutching a well-loved stuffed bear with one missing eye. "Is she like a giant burrito, Daddy?" she whispered, tilting her head. A small smile touched Marcus's lips, despite the worry tightening his chest. "Something like that." Button. "She just got very cold." Lily considered this gravely. "Is her car broken? Was it the snow? Your truck doesn't break down like that." It wasn't quite a question, more a statement of faith in her father's abilities. "Sometimes even fancy cars get stuck, honey," Marcus said softly, turning his attention back to the woman. He went to the small kitchen area, filled the kettle with water, and set it on the stove to heat for tea. Chamomile was all he had, but it was warm and soothing. He was just reaching for a mug when a low moan came from the couch. He turned quickly. The woman's eyelids fluttered, then opened. Her eyes, a startling ice blue, darted around the unfamiliar room, wide with confusion, that quickly sharpened into fear. They landed on Marcus, standing frozen by the counter. He moved slowly towards her, keeping his hands visible. His voice, low and even. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now." She blinked, trying to focus. Her lips parted, but only a dry, rasping sound came out. She tried to sit up, wincing. "Easy there," Marcus said, moving closer. "You were out pretty cold. Found you in your car, down on Route 47, middle of this blizzard." Her brow furrowed, memory slowly filtering back. "My car stalled the cold." Her voice was a raw whisper. She looked around the room again, taking in the simple furniture, the patched walls, Lily watching her silently from the doorway. Where am I, my place?" Marcus answered simply. "Name's Marcus Miller. This is my daughter." Lily gave a small, shy wave, clutching her bear tighter. The woman swallowed, seemed to gather herself, despite her obvious weakness. Eleanor Vance." She pushed herself up a little higher against the pillows. "Thank you, Marcus, for stopping." "Couldn't leave you out there," he said, shrugging slightly, uncomfortable with thanks. He retrieved the now steaming kettle and poured hot water over a chamomile tea bag in a chipped ceramic mug. He added a spoonful of honey from a jar on the counter. He held the mug out to her. "It's just chamomile. Might help warm you up." Eleanor looked at the steaming mug, then hesitantly reached out with trembling fingers. Her hands were still pale, the knuckles white. She cradled the warmth, her gaze distant for a moment. "Thank you," she murmured again, then added almost to herself, a hint of awkwardness in her tone. I have this organic chamomile blend imported from, well, never mind. This smells warm." Marcus just nodded, stepping back to give her space. He watched as she took a tentative sip, her throat working. Color was slowly returning to her face, chasing away the deathly pallor. He could see the intelligence in her eyes, the flicker of assessment, even through the exhaustion and lingering shock. She carried an air of authority, even now huddled under a homemade quilt on his worn-out couch. Her gaze drifted around the room again, lingering on the details, the slightly uneven bookshelf he'd built himself, the framed drawing Lily had made in kindergarten, tacked proudly to the wall, the faint scent of wood smoke. Then her eyes landed on the small framed photograph, sitting on the rough-hewn mantelpiece above the stove. It was a picture of him, younger, smiling, holding a baby, Lily wrapped in a pink blanket. Standing beside him, her arm linked through his, was Sarah, her dark eyes sparkling, her smile warm and bright, though tinged with the same fatigue. He now felt bone-deep Eleanor's gaze fixed on the photo. The air in the small room shifted, grew heavy with unspoken questions. Marcus felt her eyes on him, then saw them flick back to the photo, a dawning comprehension in their blue depths. He looked away, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly as he busied himself checking the fire in the stove, adding another log sooner than necessary. The warmth radiating from the iron couldn't touch the sudden chill that settled deep inside him, the ever-present ache of Sarah's absence. He didn't need to look back to know Eleanor understood. In the quiet space carved out by the storm, surrounded by the humble artifacts of his life, a silent acknowledgement passed between them. A shared understanding of loss, a fragile bridge built across the chasm of their different worlds by the universal language of grief. The stranger on his couch was no longer just a victim of the storm. She was someone who had glimpsed the map of his heart, marked by the terrain of sorrow he navigated every single day. Dawn broke, not with a burst of sunlight, but with a slow, hesitant unveiling. The wind had finally exhausted itself, leaving behind a world utterly transformed, muffled under a thick, pristine blanket of white. Outside Marcus's small window, the snow-laden pines stood like solemn sentinels in the crisp, achingly bright air. The fury of the storm had passed, revealing the stark beauty and fragile silence left in its wake. But inside the small cabin, as the fire in the stove settled into glowing embers, the invisible cracks in two very different lives were beginning to show. Marcus was already outside, bundled against the biting morning cold, his breath pluming in white clouds. He stood before the half-buried Range Rover, not with intimidation, but with the quiet concentration of a surgeon assessing a patient. He'd dug out the snow, packed around the tires and undercarriage, his movements economical and precise. Now, hood propped open toolbox resting on the snow beside him, he worked with a focused intensity that Eleanor found herself watching, mesmerized from the living room window. She'd woken feeling stiff and sore, but clear-headed. The terrifying disorientation of the night before had faded, replaced by a dawning awareness of her rescuer's quiet competence. She watched him now, his gloved hands moving deftly among the complex, unfamiliar components of her engine. He wasn't rushing, wasn't cutting corners. There was an inherent respect in the way he handled his tools, an unspoken dialogue between man and machine. Lily, bundled in her own small coat and hat, trudged out to stand beside him, handing him a wrench with solemn importance, her small face tilted up in adoration. He paused, ruffled her hair, his gruff exterior softening instantly. Eleanor felt a pang, sharp and unfamiliar, a longing for something simple, something real that her own carefully curated high-stakes world rarely offered. Value dignity in labor. Inside, the warmth felt more secure. Now Lily came back in cheeks pink and proudly presented Eleanor with a slightly crumpled drawing of a snowman. Eleanor found herself smiling genuinely, this time accepting the artwork as if it were a precious gift. She saw the lack of expensive toys, the patched elbows on Lily's sweater, but she also saw the bright spark in the child's eyes, the easy affection between father and daughter, a richness that had nothing to do with bank accounts. A little later, Marcus came back inside, stamping snow from his boots. He nodded towards the Range Rover visible through the doorway. "Should be good to go," he announced, his tone matter of fact. Battery was frozen solid, and the cold likely messed with the fuel line sensor. Warmed it up, charged. The battery cleaned the connections. She started right up. Eleanor stood, feeling a little unsteady, but infinitely better than the night before. "Marcus, I don't know how to thank you. Not just for fixing the car, but for everything. For shelter, for kindness." He shrugged, pouring himself a mug of coffee from the pot perpetually warming on the stove edge. "Just glad you're okay. Storm like that. Folks got to look out for each other." He gestured towards the table where a bowl sat. "There's a bit of soup left from last night if you want. It's the Miller House. Winter survival special." Eleanor managed a small smile, remembering the simple, hearty meal. "It was delicious, thank you." She hesitated, then reached into the pocket of her expensive snow-dampened coat. This was the part she understood the transaction. "Please let me pay you for your time, for fixing the car, for the tow I would have needed." Marcus held up a hand, shaking his head, before she could even pull out her wallet. "No, ma'am. Not necessary." "But I insist," Eleanor said, slightly taken aback. In her world, everything had a price, a value exchanged. You spent hours out there in the cold, like I said. Marcus met her gaze evenly, his expression calm but resolute. Folks look out for each other. That's just how it is. Or how it should be, anyway. He took a sip of his coffee, his quiet dignity filling the small space between them. Eleanor studied him, intrigued and slightly baffled by his refusal. It wasn't false modesty. It was principle. It's not always like that. She found herself saying, quietly, thinking of the calculated alliances and veiled competition that defined her days. In my world, people usually want something. Value purpose beyond success. Marcus gave a wry half-smile. Mine too sometimes, especially around here lately. Times are tough for tradesmen. He didn't elaborate, but the brief comment hung in the air, hinting at struggles beneath his stoic surface. Trying to bridge the gap, Eleanor tilted her head. So diagnostics, figuring out what's wrong with an engine, is that like analyzing quarterly reports, just with more grease and less complaining from shareholders? He chuckled, a low rumbling sound. Something like that. Though the engines usually make more sense. The brief moment of shared humor eased the slight tension. Eleanor knew she needed to leave to get back to her demanding schedule, her interrupted trip. Yet she felt a strange reluctance. Well, she said, gathering her composure, if you won't take payment. She retrieved a slim, elegant business card from her wallet. This is me, Eleanor Vance, CEO of Whitmore Automotive Group. Marcus took the card, his eyebrows rising slightly as he read the embossed title. He tucked it carefully into the pocket of his worn flannel shirt, his face unreadable. Inside that pocket, Eleanor didn't know, lay a crumpled final notice for a hospital bill from Lily's bout with pneumonia last winter, a figure that made his breath catch whenever he thought about it. If you truly ever need anything, Eleanor stressed the word, her gaze direct, anything at all related to, well, anything automotive or otherwise. Please call. Seriously, I owe you more than I can say. Appreciate it, Ms. Vance, Marcus said formally, the title feeling strange on his lips after the shared intimacy of the crisis. Drive safe, now roads are likely still slick in places. She nodded, pulling her coat tighter around her. Thank you again, Marcus and Lily. She smiled at the little girl who beamed back. Outside the cold bit again, but the world felt less hostile. The Range Rover started with a smooth, powerful hum, a testament to Marcus's skill. As she settled into the driver's seat, the familiar luxury felt oddly foreign after the borrowed warmth of the cabin. She glanced in the rearview mirror as she prepared to pull away. Marcus stood in the doorway, Lily tucked against his side, her small hand waving. He wasn't smiling, just watching his expression, a mixture of relief and something else. Something thoughtful, perhaps, uncertain. Their eyes met briefly in the mirror, a fleeting acknowledgement of the extraordinary night, a silent question mark hanging over the future. Then she shifted into gear, the tires crunching softly on the packed snow. The little house, the man who had shown her unexpected kindness, and the little girl with stars on her blanket, shrank in the mirror, becoming part of the vast white landscape. Eleanor Vance drove away, leaving the quiet clearing behind, but taking something intangible with her. The echo of wood smoke, the taste of simple soup, and the unsettling, compelling weight of unearned decency. The road ahead was plowed, but the path her life was on felt suddenly irrevocably altered. Weeks melted into a month, and the dramatic interlude of the blizzard began to feel like a half-remembered dream for Marcus Miller. The rhythm of life in Clarbrook resettled around him. The pre-dawn chill, the smell of coffee brewing in the quiet house, the familiar clatter and grime of Johnson's garage, Lily's bright chatter filling the evenings. He'd patched the leaky roof section, caught up on sleep, and returned the borrowed warmth of Eleanor Vance's brief presence to the realm of strange, snowbound memories. Kindness sown in a crisis often seemed dormant once the sun came out, overshadowed by the steady drumbeat of everyday survival. But winter still held Montana in its grip, and its chill reached deeper than just the frozen ground. One grey afternoon, Mr. Johnson, the garage owner, called Marcus into his small, cluttered office, his usual gruff demeanour replaced by an uncomfortable unease. Business was slower than usual, for even the off-season costs were up. He had to make cuts, not layoffs, not yet, but hours, significant hours, effective immediately. Marcus listened, his face impassive, but inside a familiar, cold dread began to spread, far colder than the February air. Fewer hours meant less pay, substantially less. It meant the already precarious balance between groceries, the heating bill Lily's needs, and the looming hospital payment from last year tipped dangerously towards impossible. He walked out of the office, nodding, thanking Johnson for the heads up. His pride a shield against the sudden panic clawing at his throat. That evening, staring at the numbers on the latest bill, the one he kept tucked away, hoping some miracle might make it disappear, the stark reality hit him. He couldn't make it work. Not like this. His gaze drifted to the worn flannel shirt hanging on a hook by the door, the one he'd worn the day Eleanor Vance left. He knew the elegant cream-colored business card was still in the breast pocket, CEO, Whitmore Automotive Group. It felt like a lifeline from another universe, tempting and impossibly remote. He shook his head, shoving the thought away. He wasn't charity case. Miles away in a gleaming high-rise office overlooking a cityscape that sparkled with indifferent lights. Eleanor Vance initialed the final page of a memo. Her executive assistant, a sharp young man named David, hesitated. "Vance, are you sure about halting the Henderson acquisition? Their board agreed to our terms. It's a guaranteed profit increase of 12%. Eleanor looked out the window, her reflection a ghostly image against the distant lights. She thought of a small garage in Montana, of calloused hands working with quiet integrity, of a little girl's drawing offered like a treasure. It's also guaranteed to put 300 people out of work just before the holidays, David," she said, her voice softer than usual. "We're pulling the offer. Find a different growth strategy. Something constructive." David blinked, surprised by the uncharacteristic shift from ruthless efficiency. "Yes, Miss Vance." As he left, Eleanor turned to her computer, pulled up a browser and typed Clarbrook, Montana into the search bar, followed by Johnson's Garage. A few clicks brought up grainy images of the small town, the modest garage front. She felt a strange pull, a sense of unfinished business that had nothing to do with corporate expansion, the memory of Marcus Miller's quiet refusal of payment. His inherent dignity in the face of hardship had lodged itself somewhere deep inside her, a counterpoint to the relentless drive for profit and power, value ripple effect. Back in Clarbrook, desperation gnawed at Marcus. He'd picked up a couple of small side jobs, worked late into the night, fixing neighbors' sputtering engines for cash, but it wasn't enough. The due date on the hospital bill loomed. One evening after Lily was asleep, he sat alone at the kitchen table, the single overhead light casting long shadows. He pulled out Eleanor Vance's card, CEO. He stared at the title, the unfamiliar name, the sleek logo, pride warred with practicality, with the fierce, protective love for his daughter. What choice did he really have? Swallowing hard, his knuckles white, as he gripped his old cell phone, he dialed the number. It rang several times before connecting not to a person, but to a crisp, automated voice navigating him through a corporate phone tree. Finally, after punching in several numbers, a professional, slightly harried-sounding assistant answered Ms. Vance's office. How may I direct your call? Yes. Marcus cleared his throat, suddenly feeling foolish out of place. The sounds of his quiet kitchen felt worlds away from the implied efficiency on the other end. My name is Marcus Miller. Miss Vance gave me her card a while back, said to call if I needed anything. There was a pause. Regarding the assistant, asked her tone, polite but coolly efficient. Well, it's kind of complicated. Marcus stammered, unsure how to phrase his situation without sounding like he was begging. He thought of Eleanor's slightly amused attempt to relate to his work. You could say, I'm encountering some, unexpected negative cash flow impacting essential operational resources. He cringed inwardly. One moment, Mr. Miller. He was put on hold, elevator music tinkling incongruously through the receiver. After what felt like an eternity, a different voice came on the line. Eleanor Vance. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, calm, controlled, intelligent, but now tinged with the unmistakable tone of a busy executive momentarily interrupted. Mr. Miller Marcus, is everything all right? There was a faint edge of caution in her voice. Miss Vance is, Eleanor, he began, feeling his carefully constructed phrasing crumble. Sorry to bother you. Things are just a bit tight here right now. At the garage, my hours got cut way back, and I've got this bill. He trailed off, hating the way it sounded. There was a fractional pause on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice was still polite, but perhaps a touch more formal, I see. Well, Marcus, as I said, I appreciated your help immensely during the storm. Whitmore Automotive does have a charitable foundation that reviews applications for community assistance. If you'd like, I can have my assistant send you the relevant forms. Forms Charitable Foundation. The words hit Marcus like a splash of icy water. He felt a flush of shame, of wounded pride. She thought he was calling for a handout, a neatly categorized corporate donation. The fragile connection he'd imagined, the shared moment of understanding, evaporated. Oh, he said, his voice suddenly flat, cutting her off. No thank you, Miss Vance. That won't be necessary. Sorry to have taken up your time. Before she could respond, he ended the call, the silence in the kitchen pressing in on him. He stared at the phone in his hand, then slowly put Eleanor's card back in his pocket. The hope that had flickered briefly died, leaving behind the bitter taste of misunderstanding and the sharp sting of his own pride. In her office, Eleanor stared at her phone, a frown creasing her forehead. His abruptness, the sudden coldness in his tone. It wasn't what she'd expected. Had she misread him completely? Was his quiet dignity just a facade? Or had she handled that badly, defaulting to corporate procedure instead of human connection? The uncertainty left her feeling strangely unsettled, the memory of his kindness now clouded by an uncomfortable, ambiguous silence. The echo from the past had returned, not as a promise, but as a dissonant, unanswered question. The abrupt silence that followed Marcus Miller's curt sign-off on the phone echoed uncomfortably in Eleanor Vance's meticulously ordered office. It wasn't the response she'd anticipated, nor one she was accustomed to. Dismissal wasn't usually aimed at her. She replayed the conversation. His initial awkwardness, the clumsy phrasing about operational resources, her own swift, almost reflexive deflection to the corporate foundation. Had she been too quick to categorize, too insulated by procedure? The memory of the man who'd pulled her from a frozen death trap, who'd refused payment with quiet dignity, clashed sharply with the image of someone making a desperate, perhaps even entitled plea for charity. The dissonance gnawed at her, a loose thread in the otherwise tightly woven fabric of her controlled world. For 2 days she tried to push it aside, immersing herself in market projections and strategic planning sessions, but the image of Marcus's face, weathered and earnest, and the sound of his flat, disappointed voice wouldn't leave her. This wasn't a business problem with a clear solution. It was something human, something unfinished. On the third morning, bypassing her usual schedule, Eleanor made a decision. She needed the truth, unfiltered by corporate layers or her own potentially flawed assumptions. She needed to go back. The drive back to Clarbrook felt different this time. No blizzard obscured the landscape, only a lingering winter greyness. The town looked smaller, quieter than she remembered, nestled vulnerably in the vast Montana expanse. She didn't drive the Range Rover. It felt ostentatious now. Instead, she took an unassuming sedan from the company fleet. She found Johnson's garage easily. It looked even more weathered in the flat daylight. Parking down the street, she walked towards it, a knot of uncertainty tightening in her stomach. She didn't go in immediately. Instead, she struck up a conversation with the owner of the small diner next door, asking about local businesses, the town's economy. The diner owner, a friendly woman with tired eyes, spoke openly about the struggles about Johnson having to cut hours for his best mechanic, Marcus Miller, a good man raising a daughter alone since his wife passed from cancer a few years back. She mentioned the clinic bills everyone knew he was still paying off. Each piece of information landed like a small blow, dismantling Eleanor's lingering defenses, her flicker of doubt. She hadn't misread him in the storm. She'd misread him on the phone. She found Marcus late that afternoon, working alone in the dim garage bay, after everyone else had left, trying to squeeze in a side job, replacing the brakes on an old pickup. The air hung cold, thick with the smell of oil and metal. He looked up as she entered, surprise flickering across his face, quickly followed by a guarded caution. He wiped his hands on an already stained rag, his stance stiffening almost imperceptibly. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice neutral, devoid of the warmth she remembered. "Didn't expect to see you back here." Marcus Eleanor began stepping further into the bay, the concrete cold beneath her expensive boots. "I owe you an apology. For the other night, on the phone." He stopped wiping his hands, his gaze level. "Nothing to apologize for. You're a busy woman." "No," she insisted, shaking her head. "I was dismissive. I defaulted, too. Procedure. I assumed things I shouldn't have." She took a breath, the admission costing her more than she'd anticipated. "It wasn't until after our call that I remembered. Sometimes people who seem the most self-reliant are the ones who find it hardest to ask for help. And sometimes," she added, her voice dropping slightly, revealing a crack in her own armor, "people who have a lot are wary because they've been targeted before. I let a past experience color my judgment. Painful truth." Twist Marcus watched her, his expression unreadable for a long moment. The sounds of the cooling engine block, ticking a dripping faucet somewhere in the back, filled the silence. Then he leaned back against the workbench, crossing his arms. "Wasn't asking for a handout, Miss Vance," he said quietly, but the defensive edge was gone, replaced by a weary honesty. "My hours got cut. Lily's mum, Sarah, her illness took everything we had saved, and then some. I was just exploring options. Made a mistake calling." He finally met her eyes, a hint of the old pride mixed with resignation. "It's my problem to solve." "It doesn't have to be, not entirely," Eleanor said softly. The air cleared between them, the misunderstanding dissolving like mist. A fragile thread of connection, frayed but not broken, seemed to re-establish itself. In the quiet garage, Eleanor allowed herself a small, relieved smile, so she said, a touch of lightness entering her voice, aiming for the humor they'd briefly shared before. "Are we agreed? No more getting stranded alone in blizzards for me." A flicker of Marcus's own dry humor returned as he pushed away from the bench. "Deal," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching upwards. "And maybe no more assuming mechanics calling CEOs just want charitable foundation forms. Also deal." Eleanor laughed quietly. The sound genuine, the tension finally broke. Then her expression grew serious again. "Marcus, I meant what I said that morning. I owe you, and I've been thinking about how to repay that debt in a way that makes sense. Not charity," she added quickly, seeing the caution return to his eyes. "Opportunity." She stepped closer, her tone shifting back towards the focused energy of the CEO. "Whitmore is opening a new regional technical training facility just outside Helena next quarter. State-of-the-art. We need top-tier talent, not just to train new technicians, but to lead them to establish the standards. We need a lead, diagnostics, and training supervisor." She paused, letting the words sink in. The position requires extensive hands-on experience, problem-solving skills, integrity, and the ability to mentor. It pays significantly more than garage rates, full benefits, relocation assistance. And she added, meeting his gaze directly, "I've already spoken to HR. The schedule can be structured with flexibility for a single parent's needs." Marcus stared at her, processing the information. Helena wasn't too far, but it was a different world. A corporate world. Supervisor training. It was beyond anything he'd considered. Alternatively, Eleanor continued seeing the conflict in his eyes. "I know good mechanics value their independence. If staying here, being your own boss, is more your speed, Whitmore has resources. We could help facilitate financing for you to take over this garage or set up your own independent shop, equipment leasing programs, business mentoring." She laid out options, concrete possibilities, not vague promises. Each was designed to leverage his skill, his work ethic, his character. He looked around the familiar, grimy bay of Johnson's garage. It was run down, struggling, but it was known. It was safe. Then he thought of Helena, of a state-of-the-art facility, of a title, of a salary that could erase the constant, gnawing anxiety, that could give Lily more security, more opportunities than Clarbrook could ever offer. But it meant change. Huge change. Working within a corporate structure, leaving the only home he'd known, facing a world where he might always feel like an outsider. Difficult choice. He thought of the hospital bill. He thought of Lily's bright, curious eyes. He thought of Sarah and the future they'd dreamed of for their daughter. A future that felt impossibly distant just yesterday. He looked back at Eleanor standing there, expectantly offering not just a job, but a different trajectory entirely. He drew a long, slow breath, the scent of oil and cold metal filling his lungs. He ran a hand over his tired face, then straightened his shoulders. The decision settled within him, heavy but clear. The training facility, Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm, holding Eleanor's gaze. The supervisor position. Tell me more about it. His words hung in the cold air of the garage, not as an eager acceptance, but as the first uncertain step onto a new unknown road. The relief on Eleanor's face was immediate, but Marcus felt the weight of the future pressing down, exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The choice was made. The real work was just beginning. 6 months felt like both a lifetime and the blink of an eye. Summer had warmed the valleys around Helena, Montana, chasing away the last vestiges of the brutal winter that had thrown Marcus Miller and Eleanor Vance together. The scars of the past, like the faint lines around Marcus's eyes, or the lingering caution in Eleanor's smile, hadn't vanished entirely, but they were no longer the defining features. On the road they now travelled undeniably different from the one they'd started. On the light held the distinct, promising glow of a new dawn. The Whitmore Regional Training Facility buzzed with focused energy. Gleaming diagnostic equipment lined the spacious bays, a stark contrast to the familiar clutter of Johnson's garage. Marcus, dressed in the crisp dark blue uniform of a Whitmore supervisor, moved confidently among a group of young trainees clustered around a complex hybrid engine. He pointed to a sensor, his explanations clear. Patient, his rough mechanic's hands, surprisingly adept at illustrating the finer points on the projected schematic. Remember, he told the aspiring technicians, his voice calm and steady. It's not just about finding the fault code. It's about understanding why it happened. Think deeper. Listen to the engine, not just the computer. He'd taken to the role with a quiet determination that surprised everyone, perhaps even himself. The corporate environment was still sometimes baffling the paperwork, occasionally mind-numbing, but the core of it, fixing things, understanding how they worked, sharing that knowledge, felt right. He was good at it. More importantly, the steady paycheck, the benefits. The reliable hours meant the gnawing anxiety that had been his constant companion was finally receding. The hospital bill was paid off. Lily was enrolled in a bright, cheerful elementary school nearby, already making friends and chattering excitedly about learning to ski next winter. The shadows hadn't disappeared entirely, but they no longer dominated his horizon. Stage 5. Rebuilding Eleanor Vance. Visited the facility, often using it as a genuine base for regional oversight. But Marcus knew her visits weren't solely about corporate duty. There was an ease between them now, a comfortable rapport built on shared experience and mutual respect. Today, she found him overseeing a practical assessment in one of the bays. Impressive setup, Miller. She commented, leaning against the doorframe, impeccably dressed as always, but with a warmth in her eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Looks like you're managing the strategic logistical support around here quite well. Marcus grinned, wiping a smudge of grease from his cheek with the back of his hand. We manage, he quipped back. So long as you don't start demanding quarterly reports on spark plug efficiency. Humor. Don't tempt me, she retorted with a smile. How's Lily settling into school? Loves it, Marcus said, his expression softening instantly at the mention of his daughter. Told her teacher yesterday that her dad fixes confused cars and knows a fancy lady CEO. Eleanor laughed, a genuine, unrestrained sound. Sounds about right. She watched him interact with the trainees, saw the respect they clearly had for him. She'd taken a risk bringing him into the Whitmore fold, stepping outside the usual recruitment protocols. But seeing him here thriving confirmed it was one of the best decisions she'd made. It reminded her that talent and integrity weren't confined to Ivy League degrees or polished resumes. It had in turn subtly shifted how she viewed her own empire, investing more in internal training programs, pushing for more community engagement initiatives, looking for the potential beneath the surface. Finding Marcus hadn't just changed his life, it had recalibrated hers. Value true richness, earned peace. Later that afternoon, after the trainees had left Marcus Eleanor, and an energetic Lily walked along a trail overlooking the sprawling valley just outside Helena. Lily skipped ahead, chasing a butterfly, her laughter echoing in the clear mountain air. She seems happy here, Eleanor remarked quietly, watching the little girl. She is, Marcus confirmed. Kids are resilient, more than we give them credit for. He paused, kicking absently at a loose stone on the path. Took me longer to adjust, maybe. Still feels strange sometimes. the quiet nights not having grease under my nails 4/7. "But it's good?" Eleanor asked gently. He looked out at the vast expanse, the mountains sharp against the late afternoon sky. "Yeah," he admitted, a slow smile spreading across his face. "It's good. Different, but good." He glanced at Eleanor, his expression open, grateful. "Thanks to you. We help each other, Marcus," she replied softly, meeting his gaze. The connection between them was palpable. Not the fiery spark of new romance, perhaps, but the steady, comfortable glow of deep friendship, of partnership, forged in unlikely circumstances. It was built on honesty, respect, and the shared understanding that they had both been rescued in different ways that winter night. Whether it grew into something more remained an open question, comfortably unasked for now. What mattered was the foundation they had built. Relationship development. Lily ran back, grabbing both their hands. "Can we have pizza tonight with extra cheese? Daddy says your corporate card can probably handle extra cheese." "Humor." Marcus groaned playfully. But Eleanor laughed again, squeezing Lily's hand. "I think the corporate card can definitely handle extra cheese tonight." As the sun began to dip towards the mountain peaks, painting the sky in strokes of gold and violet, reminiscent of that evening weeks ago when his world tilted, Marcus stood watching his daughter chatter excitedly to Eleanor. He thought back to the blizzard, the fear, the desperation. It felt like another lifetime. The road hadn't magically become smooth. There would still be challenges, uncertainties. But standing here now with Lily, safe and happy with a future that held promise instead of just worry, and with Eleanor Vance, the unexpected catalyst, the unlikely friend, beside him, he felt a profound sense of peace. Not a passive peace, but one that had been hard-earned, built moment by moment, choice by difficult choice. They had met as strangers in a storm, two lives running on parallel tracks, destined never to intersect. But a single act of kindness, given without expectation, had built a bridge. It hadn't erased the differences between their worlds, but it had shown them that decency, connection, and hope were the things that truly mattered. And as they walked back down the trail together, bathed in the warm light of the setting sun, they carried that knowledge forward, illuminating the path ahead. Step by uncertain but hopeful step. From a single desperate moment in a blinding blizzard, a bridge was built. Fragile at first, tested by pride and misunderstanding, but ultimately strengthened by honesty and connection. Isn't it remarkable how sometimes the most unexpected encounters can completely alter the path we're on, reminding us of the quiet strength within ourselves and the profound impact we can have on each other? Perhaps we've all faced storms, literal or metaphorical, where extending or accepting a hand, required crossing, divides both internal and external. Marcus and Eleanor's journey truly gave us pause, reminding us that seeing beyond the surface often reveals the deepest truths. What moment in their story resonated most powerfully with you, and why? We'd love to hear your reflections in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and consider sharing it with someone who might find inspiration in this journey of kindness and connection. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you won't miss out on more stories that explore the depths of human experience and celebrate the resilience of the spirit. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Until next time, take care and keep sharing kindness.